To capture proper shading and value, with ink at least, that's what we're going to be using today. I'm going to use a micron. And yeah, to capture value with a micron, you're going to use different techniques. The first one would be hatching, and hatching consists of making lines in the same direction. Cross hatching, on the other hand, is another way, and that is making lines in opposite directions. So you can make lines vertical or whichever way you choose, and then the next set of lines will be perpendicular or just crossing them in some way. And the third step, I'll demonstrate stippling as well. Stippling consists of making a series of tiny dots, and the more dots you make, of course, the darker that value will be. So yeah, let's dive right into that. To begin, we're going to do hatching. Hatching. Now with hatching, like I said earlier, you're making a series of lines in the same direction. And to make a darker value, you can push those lines closer together or even make a thicker line. So that's going to be my light. Okay, my third tone there, and this is going to be the darkest. Now one pass, on your first pass it might not look that dark, but of course you can just go right back over it again like I did on the other box until you get the desired darkness. Go a little bit darker. Now these techniques, of course I'm using a pen. This can also be used with graphite or a pencil or any other medium you choose to use. Now that's hatching, and I made long strokes from one side to the other. You don't need to do that. You could actually make strokes. Similar to this, where you kind of layer them, or just kind of butt them up to one another, right? So you don't need to make that full stretch from one side to the other. The main idea with hatching is the lines are going in the same way. Now I did these from top to bottom or vertical. You could also do these diagonal or horizontal. It really doesn't matter. You can even do contoured lines. Theoretically that's still hatching. And a contoured line is going to be something, hopefully this is in the frame. Contour lines will be something like, say if you were to shade an arm or a hand, you would move that line in rhythm with the shape of the body. So you would curve your lines as the form curves to indicate form. So just to demonstrate over here, those are curved, and then you could even anyway, so as you can see, that's kind of showing a curvature of maybe that could be something in form of a cylinder, like an arm or a pipe, a tube. You get the idea. Yeah, so that's hatching there. This is cross hatching. hatching and cross hatching are the two most common forms of shading that I use. Now again, guys, shading and value. Value is the darkness or lightness of a color. Shading is the actual. I guess you could use them interchangeably, but when you hear value and shading, just you could think of kind of the same thing. When I think of shading, I think of the actual act of shading, whereas value is just what it is. Like this is a dark value, that's a light value, and to make those values, I was doing a shading technique called hatching. Anyways, just to go over some vocabulary, that's not set in stone. Of course, some people use terms differently, but that's the way I view them. Okay, enough talking. To begin with cross hatching here. Now, typically cross hatching, the lightest box I'll kind of just leave as a hatch, but in this case, since I'm demonstrating actual cross hatching, I'll do it. I'll add a series of lines for you there. So there we go. It's going to be our lightest box. Okay, that's our second. Now, as you make these boxes darker, you could go slower and apply more pressure to get a thicker line. As you can see, these vertical lines are much darker here than they are over here, because here I moved much quicker with my line and didn't apply as much pressure. Here I'm moving slower and adding more pressure. So that's another way you can affect the value of the line or the darkness. And of course, another way is just adding another set of lines. So here I have lines going in 3 different directions. Okay, so 2 directions with more pressure added to make it darker. 3 directions here. And for our darkest box, typically your darkest is just going to be black. So I mean, you could just take a marker and color it in. Or excuse me, you could take something like a, let's see if I have one to show you. You could take something like this, which has a chisel tip, and it would just, color it in black really quick. But I'm demonstrating cross hatching, so I'm not going to do that. I'll actually make it as dark as I can by hatching. I'm making these lines pretty tight to one another to increase the darkness, and we haven't applied any horizontal lines, so I'll do that slowly. It's much easier for your hand to make a line in this direction than horizontally. At least for me, I've discovered that to be the case. And while filming, I can't move this pad as I typically would if I was drawing too. So normally, when you're drawing, if you want to make a different a line in a different direction, you turn your pad to a certain degree to assist with that. Now next up, we're going to do stippling. Just to touch on cross hatching again here, you don't have to do it from one side to the other. Just like hatching, you can do a small series like this. And you could also do contour lines with cross hatching. You would typically, you saw the hatching here, so I'm just going to go and make it cross hatching. You would just add in lines in the opposite direction, and now that has become cross hatching contour lines. Now next up is stippling. I should have Googled how to spell stippling, so I really hope that's right. If it's not correct, please You know, don't kill me, don't leave nasty comments. I'm sorry if it's wrong. For this case, I'm going to use my chisel tip because it's going to be faster. You guys don't want to see me stippling here for 20 minutes. So, yeah, let's begin. So, literally all I'm doing is making dots. And you want to keep your dots pretty consistent throughout. That way the tone appears the same throughout the box. Okay, so for the second box here, I'm going to try and move those dots closer to one another and maybe even apply a little more pressure to make them appear darker. From my experience, when I first started drawing, I did start drawing with graphite and pencils like most people probably do. I did fall in love with ink. So a lot of this channel will probably consist of ink drawings. Again, when I get a big enough following to receive a good number of comments, if you guys have any suggestions or if you guys would like to see anything specific, just leave them below and I'll make something specific for what you guys would like to see. But drawing with ink can be very challenging and also at the same time very rewarding. There's something about drawing and knowing that you can't go back and erase. There's a certain amount of confidence you need to acquire and kind of force yourself to have while working with ink. Then at the same time, it's somewhat liberating knowing that if you do make a mistake, the idea of going back isn't even an option. So sometimes they have what you call happy mistakes where you didn't even intend a piece to appear a certain way, but excuse me, you didn't intend for that mistake to happen, but it ended up making it look pretty cool or desirable in a different way that you didn't expect or plan. So you just have to kind of roll with it when working with ink, or even those of you who are into anime, working with, or other people, not just anime people use markers, but a lot of people do that like anime. You guys also know what it's like to make a mistake and not be able to go over it. So you have to try your best to incorporate that mistake in your piece and roll with it. Okay guys, so that box is looking pretty good, pretty dark. For the third box, and this guy here is going to be the darkest, and I'm going to use the blunt end of this chisel tip to make as big of a dot as I can. And we're going to try and just make it as dark as we can. When stippling, it's okay to be a little sporadic. The idea is to make those dots as close to one another, as consistently spaced from one another that you can. Of course, it's not going to be perfect, but just try your best. Now with all of these shading techniques, this is the best way to begin. Just make a series of boxes and color them into a different likeness or darkness, and go from there. When you draw something that has form, you are going to vary these shades consistently throughout one another without having that straight cutoff between the different shades, which can be challenging, and that's why I recommend starting off doing this and then moving to that, because once you know how to actually put down on paper a specific shade, that's kind of the hardest part, because when you're drawing, you're going to look at your object, or your subject rather, and you need to differentiate where your shadows and lights are, and then even within a shadow, you're going to have darker shadows and lighter shadows. So you really need to pinpoint and get down how to create the actual shade that you intend to. Anyways, guys, there's stippling for you. So we have hatching, which are all in one direction, cross hatching, which are a series of lines in multiple directions, and then stippling, which is a series of dots. And yeah, this is the beginning of shading and how to portray value within a piece.
Alright guys, if you liked the video, please give the video a thumbs up. I'd also love it if you subscribed. You guys have a good day. Thank you.